The worst sentence of my life wasn't handed down by a judge. It was delivered by my father, sitting at the kitchen table where I used to do my homework. He pushed a stack of felony charges toward me and looked me dead in the eye. 2 years in prison won't kill you, Julia, he said, as if he were asking for a small loan instead of demanding I sacrifice my future to cover their fraud. My life was built on the architecture of boring, verifiable facts. I was 33 years old. I was a certified public accountant. I drove a gray sedan that was 4 years away from being paid off, and I lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the quiet side of the complex. To most people, my existence probably looked like the color beige, but after the chaos of my 20s, a failed engagement to a man who gambled away our down payment and a subsequent credit score nosedive, beige was exactly what I wanted. I liked clear ledgers. I liked knowing exactly where every penny went. I liked the silence of a balanced spreadsheet. Safety was my currency. I had spent the last 18 months meticulously rebuilding my savings, dollar by painful dollar, restoring the credit rating my ex had torched. I was proud of my clean record. In my line of work, integrity was not just a virtue, it was a commodity. If you could not be trusted with the keys to the vault, you were unemployable. I protected my reputation with the same ferocity that a mother bear protects a cub. It was all I really had. That was why the phone call on a Tuesday evening felt so jarring. It was my mother. She did not call on Tuesdays. We had a schedule. Sundays were for shallow updates about the weather and her garden club. Tuesdays were for silence. When I answered, her voice was thin, brittle like dried leaves. She told me I needed to come to Briar Glen immediately. She said it was a family emergency. She said it could not wait until the weekend. I asked if Dad was okay. I asked if it was a heart thing. He is fine, she said, but we need you. Julia, please just drive down. I drove the 45 minutes to Briar Glen with a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. I imagined medical diagnoses. I imagined a foreclosure notice. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, had always lived right at the edge of their means, projecting an image of upper-middle-class stability that required a constant juggling act of loans and credit cards. I had tried to help them budget years ago, but my father had shut me down, telling me that a child does not lecture a parent on how to manage a household. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked perfectly normal. The lawn was manicured to a golf course green. The porch light was on. It was a beautiful house, the kind that appeared in real estate brochures to signify the American dream. But I knew the foundation had a crack in the basement they kept painting over, and the roof leaked when the rain came from the east. I walked inside, expecting tears or an ambulance. Instead, I found a pot roast sitting in the center of the dining room table. The good china was set out. My father was sitting at the head of the table, wearing a button-down shirt, his hands clasped over a manila folder. My mother was hovering near the sideboard, wringing a dish towel in her hands. The air in the room was heavy, suffocatingly still. It smelled of lemon polish and roasted meat. But underneath that, there was the metallic tang of adrenaline. They were too calm. That was the first thing that set my internal alarms ringing. If this were a medical emergency, there would be frantic energy. This was not frantic. This was rehearsed. Sit down. Julia, my father said. His voice was steady, the voice he used when he was trying to sell a client on an insurance package they did not need. I sat. I did not take off my coat. What is going on? I asked. Is someone sick? My mother sat down across from me. She looked at my father, then down at her empty plate. She looked older than she had 2 weeks ago. Her makeup was applied a little too heavily, as if to mask the sleeplessness around her eyes. We have a situation, my father said. He placed a hand on the manila folder. And we need to handle it as a family. You know how much this house means to us. You know how hard we have worked to keep everything afloat for you kids. I nodded slowly. I was an only child. So the plural was a rhetorical device. He was building a narrative. I recognized the pitch. Is this about money? I asked. Because I told you. I am still building back my savings. I can't. It is not about borrowing money. He interrupted. Not exactly. He opened the folder. He slid a piece of paper across the polished mahogany. It was a photocopy of a legal complaint. I saw the seal of the county court. I saw the words, felony embezzlement, and then, with a jolt that felt like touching a live wire, I saw my own name. Julia Henderson. I stared at the paper. The words swam for a second before snapping into focus. The complaint alleged the misappropriation of funds from a nonprofit organization called Renfall Community Outreach. The amount listed was substantial. $75,000. My mouth went dry. What is this? I whispered. I don't know what Renfall Community Outreach is. I have never heard of them. My father took a breath. He looked pained, as if my confusion were hurting him. It is a misunderstanding, he said, a clerical error that got out of hand, but the prosecutor is involved now, and they are looking for someone to pin it on. I looked up at him. Who to pin it on? Dad. My name is on this. Why is my name on this? My mother reached across the table and tried to touch my hand. I pulled back. Julia, honey, listen, she said, her voice trembling. We were trying to do something good. We were trying to help the community. Dad has been consulting for Renfall. You know how he likes to stay busy. Consulting? I repeated. He needed some help with the books. She continued, rushing the words. Just some formatting, organizing the ledger. We knew you wouldn't mind helping out. You're so good with numbers. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. I never helped him with books. I never touched a ledger for Renfall. I didn't do any work for this company. I said, my voice sounded strange, detached. My father sighed. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and stern authority. You might have forgotten. Julia, you were going through a hard time last year. The breakup, the move. You were stressed. You came over for dinner one night, and I had some papers. You signed a few things to help me get the account set up. You wanted to help. I stared at him. I had a memory like a steel trap. It was my job to remember. I remembered every tax form I filed, every deduction I claimed. I did not sign papers for a nonprofit I had never heard of. I did not sign this. I said, I would remember signing for a bank account or a business registration. My father's face hardened. He tapped the paper. Well, the state believes you did. The signature is there. The account is in your name. He pulled another sheet from the folder and slid it over. It was a bank signature card. At the bottom, in blue ink, was a loop and a slant that looked terrifyingly like my autograph. It wasn't perfect, but to a layman, or a jury, it would look like mine. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Someone forged my signature. I said, we have to go to the police. We have to tell them this is fraud. No, my father said. The word was sharp, like a gunshot. No police. Why? I asked. Dad, this is a felony. This ends my career. I lose my license. I go to jail. We have to report this immediately. We can't report it, my mother whispered. I looked at her. Why? Because, she said, tears finally spilling over her lashes. Because if you say you didn't do it, they will come for your father. The room went silent. The clock on the mantel ticked. Tick, tick, tick. I looked from my mother to my father. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the wall. His jaw set. What do you mean? I asked. The funds were reallocated, my father said, choosing his words with agonizing care. To cover the mortgage. To pay for your mother's treatments last winter. It was a bridge loan. Julia, it was supposed to be paid back before the grant audit, but the audit came early. My stomach turned over. I felt bile rise in my throat. You stole money. I said, you stole grant money, and you used my name to do it. We didn't steal it, he snapped. We borrowed it, and we put it in your name because my credit is shot, and yours was recovering. We thought we were protecting the family assets. We thought we could pay it back before anyone noticed. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. I have to go to the police. I can't be a part of this. Sit down, my father roared. It was the voice he used when I was a teenager. The voice that meant the discussion was over. I didn't sit, but I froze. "If you go to the police," he said, lowering his voice to a dangerous growl, "you send your mother and me to prison for 20 years. Is that what you want? You want to see your mother die in a cell? She isn't strong. Julia, she won't survive it." He was leveraging her health. He was leveraging my guilt. He was leveraging the entire history of my childhood. Every sacrifice they had ever claimed to make for me. "So you want me to take the fall?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You want me to go to prison for you?" My father softened his face. He put on the mask of the benevolent patriarch. "It won't be that bad," he said. "We have spoken to a lawyer, a good one, Miles Brandt. He knows the prosecutor. He says, given your clean record and the fact that it's a first offense, we can work out a deal, a plea. A plea to what?" I asked. "A low-level felony," he said casually. "Maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years. You'll be out in half that time with good behavior. Minimum security. It's basically a camp." I stared at him. He was discussing my incarceration as if it were a semester abroad. 2 years? I choked out. "Dad, I'm an accountant. A felony means I can never work in finance again. I lose my license. I lose my reputation. I lose everything I have built." "You can rebuild," my mother said, wiping her eyes. "We will help you. We will support you when you get out. You can live here. We'll take care of you." I looked at the house, this house that was bought with stolen money, this house that was a lie. "You did this to me." I said, "You set me up. We did what we had to do to survive." My father said, "Families do hard things for each other. We raised you. We put clothes on your back. We paid for your college. Now the family needs you to step up." He leaned in closer. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth a father should have for his daughter. 2 years in prison won't kill you." "Julia," he said. The sentence hung in the air. It was brutal in its practicality. He had weighed my life against his own comfort and decided I was the acceptable loss. I looked at the paperwork again, the timeline, the amounts. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a calculated setup. They had opened the account months ago. They had been planning this while I was eating Sunday dinner at this very table, while I was telling them about my promotion. I felt like I was going to be sick. The room was spinning. "I can't do this." I said, "You have to." My father said, "The arraignment is on Thursday. Miles Brandt expects to see you tomorrow morning at 9. He has the plea deal ready. You go in, you sign the admission of guilt, and we keep this quiet. If you fight it, if you drag this out, they will look deeper. They will find everything, and then we all go down, and it will be your fault." My mother started crying harder. "Please, Julia, please don't destroy us." I looked at her tears. For the first time in my life, I wondered if they were real, or if they were just another tool, like the forged signature. "I need air," I said. I turned and walked toward the door. My father stood up. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "I'm going home," I said. "You need to be at Brandt's office tomorrow." He called after me. "Don't do anything stupid. Julia, remember who loves you." I walked out into the cool night air. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my keys twice before I could unlock the car. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, gasping for breath. The house loomed over me, a dark silhouette against the stars. It didn't look like home anymore. It looked like a trap. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts. Just the hum of the tires on the pavement and the screaming in my head. 2 years won't kill you. When I got to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I threw my coat on the floor and went straight to my laptop. I sat at my kitchen table, the blue light of the screen illuminating the darkness. I needed to see the logic. I needed to see the numbers. My father had said I signed the papers during a stressful period last year. He had implied it was my negligence, my memory lapse. I opened my calendar archives. I pulled up the dates listed in the complaint I had memorized from the glimpse at the table. The account was opened on March 14th of last year. The first large transfer, the initial theft, happened on March 16th. I stared at the dates. March 14th. I wasn't in Briar Glen on March 14th. I opened my email. I searched for Delta Airlines. I searched for hotel confirmation. There it was. A confirmation email for a work conference in Chicago. I had flown out on the morning of March 13th and returned late on the night of the 17th. I had been 400 miles away when my signature was applied to that bank card. I had been sitting in a seminar on tax law changes in the Midwest when my parents were in a bank in Briar Glen, stealing my identity. It wasn't a memory lapse. It wasn't a mistake. I pulled up the hotel receipt attached to the email. It showed check-in, room service, and checkout. It was ironclad. I sat back in my chair. The fear that had been gripping my throat shifted. It cooled. It hardened. It turned into something sharp and dangerous. They had lied. They hadn't just borrowed my name. They had impersonated me. They had forged a document on a day they knew I wasn't there. Or perhaps they hadn't bothered to check my schedule because they never thought I would check theirs. They assumed I would fold. They assumed I was the same obedient daughter who always did her homework and never talked back. They assumed I would trust them. I looked at the phone number for Miles Brandt that my father had texted me 5 minutes ago. Be there at 9. Don't be late. If I went to the police now, my father was right. It would be a mess. It would be my word against theirs. And they had a head start. They had a lawyer. They had a narrative. And I had a signature on a bank card that looked just enough like mine to create reasonable doubt. But I had something they didn't have. I knew they were lying about the timeline. I didn't reply to the text. I closed my laptop. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. If I screamed and yelled and showed them the flight receipt, they would just come up with another lie. They would say I signed it before I left. They would say I mailed it. They would pivot. They were good at pivoting. No. I needed more than a flight receipt. I needed to know exactly how deep this went. I needed to know what else was in my name. My father had said, "Families do hard things." He was right. I was about to do something very hard. I was going to let them think they had won. I was going to let them think I was the scared, obedient daughter they could bully into a prison cell. I would meet with their lawyer. I would play the part. But I wasn't going to sign their plea deal. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. My reflection was a ghost in the glass. I looked the same as I had this morning, but I was a different person. The Julia who trusted her parents was gone. She had died at the dinner table when her father told her that 2 years in prison was a fair price for his comfort. I was the only one left, and I was an accountant. I knew how to find the errors. I knew how to track the discrepancies. They wanted me to look at the books? Fine, I would look at the books. I would look at everything. And I wouldn't stop until the math made sense, even if I had to burn the equation to the ground. The office of Miles Brandt was designed to intimidate. It was a cavern of dark walnut paneling, hunter green leather, and the distinct, stale smell of old money preserving itself. It was located in a strip of renovated brownstones in downtown Briar Glen. The kind of place where the receptionist whispered and the coffee was served in actual porcelain. I sat in a wingback chair that was slightly too low, forcing me to look up at Brandt. He was a man in his late 50s with a hairline that was retreating with dignity and a suit that cost more than my car. My parents sat on the sofa to my right, perched on the edge of the cushions like eager spectators at a tennis match. Brandt did not open a file. He did not take notes. He simply folded his hands on his empty desk and looked at me with a practiced expression of weary benevolence. "We have a narrow window. Julia," he said. His voice was smooth, like bourbon poured over gravel. The prosecutor, Mr. Vance, is a reasonable man, but he is under pressure to show results on white-collar crime. If we wait, he hardens. If we act now, we can frame this as a lapse in judgment rather than a predatory scheme. I looked at him. A lapse in judgment. I repeated, "That is what we are calling felony embezzlement?" Brandt grimaced slightly, as if I had used a vulgar word at a dinner party. "We prefer to call it an undocumented allocation of resources," he said. "The terminology matters less than the resolution." I have spoken with your father. We believe the best path forward is a pre-indictment plea. We offer full restitution over a 5-year period. You accept a plea to a lesser charge of falsifying business records, and we ask for 24 months. With the overcrowding in the state system, you would likely serve less than a year, maybe even house arrest, if the judge is feeling charitable. My father nodded vigorously. House arrest would be great. Jules, you could stay with us. We'd set up the guest room. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. They were planning my incarceration like it was a gap year. I want to see the evidence, I said. The room went quiet. Brant blinked. Excuse me? He asked. I want to see the discovery, I said, keeping my voice level. I want to see the bank records. I want to see the signature cards. I want to see the emails between Renfall Community Outreach and this alleged account. If I am going to plead guilty to a crime, I want to see exactly what I am admitting to. Brant sighed and leaned back. Julia, discovery is a long, drawn-out process. If we file motions for discovery, we trigger an adversarial stance with the district attorney. We lose the goodwill. We lose the deal. I don't care about the deal. I said, I care about the facts. You are asking me to go to prison. I think I am entitled to see the paperwork. My mother leaned forward. Her eyes were wide, pleading. Julia, please. Mr. Brant knows what he is doing. Don't be difficult. We don't have time for you to play accountant. I turned to look at her. Play accountant? Mom, that is my actual job. That is the career you are asking me to flush down the toilet. Your father and I are just trying to protect you from a trial, she said, her voice rising in pitch. A trial would be public. It would be messy. Everyone would know. I realized then, with a clarity that felt like ice water in my veins, that she wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me. At the terrifying prospect of her own exposure, she wasn't scared for me. She was scared of me. Brant cleared his throat. Listen to your parents. Julia, they have retained me to manage this situation. Management requires efficiency. We need to present a united front. If you start digging into the weeds, you might find things that complicate the narrative. Complexity is the enemy of a plea deal. Complicate the narrative, I echoed. You mean I might find out I didn't do it? Brant's eyes narrowed. He looked at my father, then back to me. We are operating under the understanding that the state has sufficient evidence to convict, he said coldly. Whether you technically recall every transaction is irrelevant. The paper trail leads to you. My job is to minimize the damage, not to embark on a crusade for absolute truth. The truth, in my experience, is usually expensive and disappointing. He slid a document across the desk. It was a single page, a retainer agreement. But attached to it was a draft of a letter to the district attorney. Read this, he said. It is a statement of intent. It says you are willing to cooperate and take responsibility. We need this signed by Friday. I looked at the paper. It was vague, but damning. Julia Henderson, acknowledge oversight of the accounts. I won't sign this today, I said. Brant checked his watch. He was done with me. Take it home. Read it, but bring it back signed on Friday, or I cannot help you. My parents walked me to the parking lot. My father gripped my elbow a little too tightly. You embarrassed us in there, he hissed. Miles is the best lawyer in the county. You treat him with respect. He treats me like a criminal. I said, you are a criminal. Julia, he snapped. According to the state of New York, you are a felon. Miles is the only thing standing between you and a maximum sentence. Stop fighting us. Just do what he says. I pulled my arm away. I need to go to work. I lied. I didn't go to work. I drove straight back to my apartment, locked the deadbolt, and closed the blinds. The silence of my living room felt different now. It felt fragile. I made a pot of strong coffee and sat down at my desk. If Miles Brant wouldn't give me the discovery documents, I would find them myself. I was an auditor. Finding things people wanted to hide was what I did for a living. I started with the basics. I logged into the 3 major credit bureaus. I had frozen my credit after the breakup, but I had unfrozen it recently to shop for better car insurance. That was my mistake. That was the window they had used. I pulled the Experian report first. I scanned the list of open accounts: my car loan, my student loans, paid off, my primary credit card, and there it was, a line item I had never seen before. Citibank Business Line of Credit. Opened 22 months ago. 22 months. I did the math. That was nearly 2 years ago. My father had said this was a recent issue, a bridge loan to cover the mortgage before an audit. But this account had been open for almost 2 years. I clicked on the details. The address listed for the account wasn't my apartment. It wasn't my parents' house. It was a P.O. box in a town called Stonebridge, 20 miles north of Briar Glen. I wrote down the P.O. box number. Then I opened the Secretary of State's Business Registry database. It was public record, searchable by name. I typed in Julia Henderson. Nothing. I typed in Henderson. A list populated. Henderson Family Trust, Henderson Insurance, and then, near the bottom, Henderson Ledger Solutions, LLC. I clicked on the filing. The registered agent was me, Julia Henderson. The signature on the Articles of Incorporation was a digital scrawl that looked vaguely like mine. The business address was listed as 4022 Oak Street, Unit B, in Briar Glen. I pulled up Google Maps and typed in the address, 4022 Oak Street. Street view loaded. It was a strip mall. Unit B was a vacant storefront with a for lease sign in the window, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. I stared at the screen. My parents had created a shell company in my name. They had incorporated it, opened credit lines, and presumably funneled money through it for 2 years. This wasn't a desperate, one-time grab to save the house. This was a structure. This was a business model. I checked the phone number associated with the LLC filing. It wasn't my number. It wasn't my parents' landline. It was a mobile number with a local area code. I dialed it from my cell, blocking my caller ID. It rang 4 times. Then a voicemail picked up. It was a generic robotic voice. You have reached the voicemail of 555. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from a cold, hard rage. They had stolen my identity long before the emergency dinner. They had been operating Henderson Ledger Solutions while I was coming over for Christmas, while I was buying them anniversary gifts, every time my father asked how my job was going. He knew he was running a shadow version of my career out of a vacant storefront. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Dad is really upset. Please just sign the paper Miles gave you. We need to drop it off tomorrow morning to show good faith. It's the only way to keep the family safe. Love you, love you. The words looked grotesque on the screen. I looked at the draft letter Brant had given me. Statement of responsibility. It was a confession. If I signed it, I was giving the prosecutor a signed confession before I had even seen the evidence against me. It was suicide. But if I didn't sign it, my parents would escalate. They would tell Brant I was uncooperative. Brant would tell the prosecutor. The plea deal would vanish, and the state would come for me with the full weight of the law. I needed help, real help, not a family friend who played golf with the judge. I opened a new browser tab. I searched for criminal defense attorney Stonebridge City fraud. I wanted someone outside of Briar Glen, someone outside of the cozy, incestuous loop of small-town favors. One name kept coming up in the reviews, Alyssa Quill. The reviews used words like shark, unrelenting, and terrifying. I dialed her office. It was 6 p.m. I expected an answering service. Instead, a woman answered on the second ring. Quill Law, she said. Her voice sounded like she was in the middle of a cigarette. I need a consultation. I said, it is urgent. I have been accused of embezzlement, and my parents are trying to make me sign a confession. There was a pause, a silence that felt heavy with judgment. Can you pay? She asked. I don't take payment plans, and I don't work for free. I have savings. I said, be here at 8 a.m. She said, bring everything you have, and do not sign a damn thing. Alyssa Quill's office was the opposite of Miles Brant's. It was in a glass and steel building in Stonebridge City. The furniture was modern, sharp-edged, and white. There was no smell of old money here. It smelled of espresso and printer toner. Alyssa was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with hair cut into a sharp bob that looked like it could cut glass. She wore a black suit and no jewelry. She read the complaint. She read Brant's letter. She looked at the credit report I had printed out. She didn't say a word for 10 minutes. She just flipped pages, her eyes scanning rapidly. Finally, she looked up. "You are being set up," she said flatly, "but you already know that." I nodded. "Your parents are using the classic family shield maneuver," she said. "They know the prosecutor wants a conviction. They know you look like the perfect fall guy. Clean record, accountant, access to the knowledge. If you sign this letter from Brant, you are finished. You will go to prison, and you will never work in finance again." "What do I do?" I asked. "If I don't sign it?" "They said the plea deal is off. Let it be off," she said. "Plea deals are for guilty people, or for innocent people who are too broke to fight." "You have savings?" "Yes." "Then we fight, but we have to be smart. Your parents and Brant are trying to railroad you into a quick conviction because the moment this goes to discovery, their house of cards falls down. They need you to confess so the investigation stops." She tapped the credit report. "This LLC? This is your golden ticket. It was opened when you were out of town?" "Yes, I have the flight records." "Good, but that is a defense for trial. We need to stop them from crushing you right now. We need leverage." She leaned back, steepling her fingers. "They are pressuring you to sign this statement of responsibility?" "Yes, they want it today." "Okay," she said. "Here is what you do. You tell them you will sign it." I stared at her. "What?" "You tell them you will sign it," she repeated. "But you tell them that because it is a legal matter involving family assets. You want it notarized properly. You want everything above board." "Why would I do that?" "Because," Alyssa said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips, "you are going to prepare a packet. It will have the letter they want. But attached to it, you are going to include a mutual affidavit of fact." "What is that?" "It is a document I'm going to draft for you right now," she said. "It will state that while you are accepting responsibility for the accounts, your parents acknowledge that they were the primary beneficiaries of the funds, that they directed the creation of the LLC, and that they maintained physical control of the checkbooks. They will never sign that." I said, "They might," Alyssa said. "If they are desperate enough, if they think it is just legal jargon to help you get a lighter sentence. You frame it as a formality. You tell them Brant said it would help the judge see that it was a family matter and not just greed. You tell them it protects them from being investigated separately. And if they sign it?" "If they sign it," Alyssa said, her eyes gleaming, "we have them. We have a sworn, notarized admission that they were involved. It destroys their ability to claim ignorance. It binds them to the crime. It turns their scapegoat into an anchor. But it has to be notarized." She added, "A mobile notary, someone independent, not their friend, not Brant's secretary. You hire a third party, someone who will follow the book." I felt a shiver go down my spine. It was a trap, a legal bear trap. "Is it legal?" I asked. "Absolutely," she said. "You are asking them to sign a truthful statement. If they refuse, you don't sign the confession. If they sign, you have leverage. It is high stakes, Julia. But right now, you are drowning. I am handing you a spear." I spent the afternoon in a Kinko's, printing documents. I felt like a spy in my own life. I had the statement of responsibility that Brant had written. It was on top. Underneath it, stapled securely, was the document Alyssa had drafted. Affidavit of mutual knowledge and beneficiary status. The language was dense, intentionally boring. It looked like standard boilerplate, but hidden in the clauses were the landmines. Parties acknowledged that Robert and Eleanor Henderson maintained access to the secure correspondence. Parties agree that funds were utilized for the maintenance of the primary residence. It was the truth, but on paper, it looked like an indictment. I called my father at 4 o'clock. "I'm ready to sign," I said. My voice was steady. I practiced it in the mirror. "Good girl," he said, the relief audible in his voice. Bring it over. I want to do it right. Dad, I said, I don't want any technicalities messing up the deal with the prosecutor. I hired a mobile notary to come to the house at 6. She can stamp everything, verify our IDs, and we can be done with it. He hesitated. A notary? Is that necessary? Miles didn't say we needed a notary. I told him I wanted to be safe. I told him I wanted to make sure the court saw we were being professional. It costs $50. I'm paying for it. Just have Mom there. We all need to sign. We all need to sign? He asked. Just to witness it. I said, to show we are a united front, like you said. He paused. The silence stretched. I held my breath. Fine, he said. 6 o'clock. Don't be late. I hung up and exhaled a breath I felt I had been holding for 2 days. I called the number Alyssa had given me for the notary. Her name was Renee Park. Alyssa said she was by the book, efficient and observant. I met Renee in the parking lot of a grocery store 2 blocks from my parents' house at 5:45. She was a woman in her 30s with glasses and a sensible blazer. She drove a pristine Honda Civic. I handed her the packet. This is the document set. I said, I need you to notarize the signatures. But I also need you to be aware. My parents might be difficult. They might try to remove pages. Renee looked at me. She flipped through the packet. She saw the staple. If the document is stapled, it is one instrument, she said. I cannot notarize a partial instrument. If they remove pages, I cannot proceed. Exactly. I said. She looked at my face. She saw the fear I was trying to hide. I am just a notary. Ms. Henderson, she said gently. I witness signatures. I verify identity. I ensure willingness. If I sense coercion, or if the signers are confused, I stop. That is all I ask. I said. We drove to the house in separate cars. I pulled into the driveway first. My parents' house looked the same as it always did. Welcoming. Warm. A lie constructed of brick and mortar. I walked up the path with Renee behind me. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wasn't just walking into my childhood home. I was walking into a courtroom of my own making. I wasn't trying to punish them. I told myself that. I was just trying to survive. I was just trying to stop the water from rising over my head. But as I reached for the doorknob, I felt a heavy, sinking realization in my gut. The truth wasn't just that they stole money. The truth was that they had built a machine to steal it, and they had fed me into the gears without a second thought. And if this worked, if I trapped them in their own lies, I wasn't just saving myself, I was dismantling my family. I opened the door. My parents were waiting in the living room. There was coffee on the table. My mother was smiling. A tight, anxious smile. Hi, honey, she said. I stepped inside, Renee's footsteps echoing behind me. Hi, Mom, I said. Let's get this over with. I placed the packet on the coffee table. The white pages gleamed under the soft light of the chandelier. It looked innocent. It looked like peace. It was a bomb, and I was about to light the fuse. The living room of my childhood home had been staged for a performance of domestic tranquility. My mother had set out the ceramic coasters, the ones with the hand-painted birds she had bought at a craft fair in Vermont 10 years ago. A fresh pot of coffee sat on a silver tray, steam curling lazily into the stagnant air. There was a plate of store-bought cookies, arranged in a perfect circle. It looked like a scene from a magazine advert for life insurance. Secure, warm, generational, but the air tasted like sulfur. I sat on the edge of the floral sofa, my knees pressed together, my hands folded in my lap to hide the tremors. On the coffee table, right next to the cookies, sat the packet of documents. It was thick, heavy, and terrifying. Renee Park, the mobile notary, sat in the armchair where my father usually watched the evening news. She was a picture of professional detachment. She had placed her notary journal on the table, a black-bound book that looked like a ledger of judgment. She had already lined up her stamp and her embosser. My father was pacing near the fireplace. He was trying to look casual, but his movements were jerky. He kept checking his watch. "Let's get this moving," he said, forcing a smile at Renee. "We appreciate you coming out so late. We just need to get these formalities handled so we can get dinner on the table." Renee didn't smile back. She adjusted her glasses and opened her journal. "I need to see valid government identification for all signers," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the social lubrication my parents relied on, "and I need to verify that all parties are signing of their own free will." My parents produced their driver's licenses immediately. I handed mine over slowly. Renee checked the expiration dates, looked at our faces, and then logged the details in her book. She wrote down the time. 6:14 in the evening. "Okay," Renee said. She turned the packet toward me. "Julia, this appears to be a multi-part document, a statement of responsibility and a mutual affidavit of fact. Is that correct?" My mother stiffened. She was sitting next to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, lilac and denial. "It is just the standard legal packet," my mother said quickly. "For the lawyer." Renee ignored her and looked at me. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded thin, but steady. "It is a combined agreement." I reached for the packet. I turned the first page, the one Miles Brandt had written, the one that confessed my guilt. I let it rest there for a moment. My father stopped pacing and leaned in, his eyes hungry. "Just sign it, Jules," he said softly. "Let's put this behind us." I turned the page again, and again. I flipped past the confession to the second section, the one Alyssa Quill had drafted, the mutual affidavit. I smoothed the paper. "I need you both to sign this section first," I said. My father squinted. He reached out and picked up the packet, scanning the text. His brow furrowed. "What is this?" he asked. "This wasn't in the email Miles sent. It is a clarification." I said, "Miles said we needed to show the court that this was a family matter. This document just confirms that you were aware of the accounts and that the money went to the household. It proves I didn't spend it on." I searched for a plausible lie, on drugs or gambling. It makes me look sympathetic. My father read the text. I watched his eyes track the lines. Robert and Eleanor Henderson exercised control over the dispersal of funds. Julia Henderson acted under familial direction. His face went red. "We are not signing this," he said. He looked at Renee, then back at me. "This is unnecessary. Miles didn't ask for this. This makes it look like we were involved." "You were involved, Dad," I said. He glared at me, his eyes darting to the notary. Renee was watching him, her pen hovering over her journal. "I am not signing it," he snapped. He tried to separate the pages. He grabbed the corner of the affidavit to tear it away from the confession. "Stop," Renee said. It wasn't a shout, but it commanded the room. My father froze. "The document is stapled," Renee said calmly. "It is presented as a single instrument. You cannot remove pages during the notarization process. If you alter the document, I cannot notarize any of it." My father looked at the staple as if it were a physical shackle. "Julia, be reasonable," my mother pleaded. Her voice dropped to that wet, quavering tone she used to get her way with customer service agents. "We can't sign this. It's too specific," Miles said to keep it vague. "We can just sign the first part. We can do this other part later. Just between us." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had bandaged my scraped knees and taught me to balance a checkbook. She was asking me to confess to a felony while refusing to admit, even on a piece of paper that would sit in a lawyer's drawer, that she had spent the money. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. "Excuse me?" my father asked. "No," I repeated. "I will not sign the confession unless you sign the affidavit. It is one packet. We do it all, or we do none of it. And if we do none of it, I go home, and I tell Miles Brandt I am not accepting the plea." My father's face contorted. The mask of the loving parent slipped, revealing the terrified, cornered animal underneath. "You ungrateful little—" he started, then caught himself. He looked at Renee. She was writing in her journal. He took a breath, trying to regain control. "Julia, we don't have time for games. The arraignment is in 48 hours. If you don't sign this, the prosecutor files the charges. You go to jail. Do you understand? We are trying to save you. Then sign the paper. I said, if you are trying to save me, sign the paper that says I did this for the family. If it is just a formality, why does it matter? Because it exposes us, he hissed, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. If this gets out, Grant Halverson will... He stopped. The name hung in the air like a curse word. Grant Halverson? I asked. Who is Grant Halverson? My mother gasped. She reached out and gripped my father's arm, her fingernails digging into his sleeve. Bob, stop, she whispered. My father pulled away from her. He was sweating now. I could see the sheen on his forehead. He looked at the packet, then at me, then at the clock. He was doing the math. He was weighing the immediate threat of the prosecutor against the abstract threat of a piece of paper. He grabbed the pen from the table. Fine, he spat. Fine. If you want to drag us down with you, fine. But you are signing that confession first. No, I said, you sign first. He looked at me with pure hatred. It was a look I would carry with me for the rest of my life. It was the look of a man who realizes his property has decided to speak. He bent over the table and scrawled his signature on the affidavit. He pressed so hard the pen tore the paper slightly. There, he said. Happy? My mother hesitated. She looked at the paper, trembling. Eleanor, sign it, my father commanded. She took the pen. She was crying now, silent tears that tracked through her powder. She signed her name, small and cramped. Underneath his, Renee stood up. She checked the IDs again. Do you swear that the contents of this affidavit are true to the best of your knowledge? She asked. My father gritted his teeth. Yes. My mother nodded. Yes. Renee stamped the page. The sound of the stamper hitting the table was loud, like a gavel. Thump. Now you. My father said to me, sign the other one. I took the pen. I turned back to the statement of responsibility. I felt a wave of nausea. I was about to sign a document admitting to a crime I didn't commit. Even with the affidavit, it was a risk. It was a terrible risk. But I had to get out of that room with the proof. I signed my name, Julia Henderson. Renee stamped that page too. Thump. She wasn't done. She looked at my father. Sir, you mentioned a name earlier. She said, Grant Halverson. And you stated that this document might expose you. For my journal, I need to clarify if there are any other parties involved in this transaction who are not present. My father's head snapped up. That was a figure of speech. He said quickly, too quickly. Renee looked at him, her expression unreadable. She wrote something down, and regarding the accounts, she continued, looking at my mother, the affidavit states you had control. Does that mean you were in possession of the checkbooks and debit cards associated with the Henderson Ledger Solutions, LLC? My mother blinked, caught off guard by the direct question. Well, yes, she stammered. We kept them in the safe. Julia didn't. She didn't live here, so we held on to them for safekeeping. Renee nodded. She wrote, Mother confirms possession of financial instruments in home safe. My father realized what was happening. He realized that Renee wasn't just a rubber stamp. She was a witness. That is enough, he said. We are done here. Renee finished writing. She closed her journal. She picked up the packet. I need to seal the notary block, she said. She applied the final seal. She handed the packet to me. I took it. My hands were gripping it so tight my knuckles were white. My father held out his hand. Give it to me, he said. I'll take it to Miles in the morning. I looked at his hand. I looked at the packet. This was the pivot point. This was the moment where I either won or lost. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were 2 high-quality color photocopies of the entire packet. Minus the notary stamps, I had made them earlier. Anticipating this moment, I handed him the envelope. Here are your copies, I said. He frowned. He opened the envelope. He saw the copies. I want the originals. Julia, he said. No, I said. I stood up. I clutched the notarized packet to my chest. I am the client. Miles represents me. I will deliver the documents to his office. My father stepped forward. He was a big man, and for a second, I thought he was going to hit me. I saw the violence flare in his eyes, the frustration of a man who is used to controlling his world and is suddenly losing his grip. Renee cleared her throat. She was standing by the door, her hand on the latch. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Her voice was loud. My father stopped. He looked at Renee, then back at me. What? He couldn't take the papers by force, not in front of a witness, not in front of someone who had his driver's license number and his signature in a government-regulated journal. "You are making a mistake," he said. His voice was low, vibrating with menace. "You are playing a dangerous game. Julia, you don't know what you are doing." I walked backward toward the door, keeping Renee between me and my father. "I think I know exactly what I'm doing." I said, "I am saving the family. Isn't that what you wanted?" I stepped out onto the porch. The cool evening air hit my face. I walked fast, my heels clicking on the pavement. Renee was right beside me. "Walk me to my car?" I asked her. "Absolutely," she said. We walked to her Civic. She waited until I was inside my car with the doors locked before she got into hers. I drove away. I didn't look back at the house. I watched the rearview mirror until the subdivision disappeared around a curve. I drove for 20 minutes before I pulled over in a brightly lit gas station parking lot. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel and shook. I shook so hard my teeth chattered. I had done it. I had the affidavit, but my father's words were echoing in my ears. "Grant Halverson, you don't know what you are doing." He was right. I didn't know who Grant Halverson was, but I was going to find out. That night, my phone became an instrument of torture. I had returned to my apartment and double-locked the door. I had wedged a chair under the handle, a melodramatic gesture that suddenly felt necessary. The call started at 8 o'clock. First, it was my mother. She left a voicemail, her voice thick with tears. "Julia, please, you have to bring the originals back. Dad is spiraling. We can't let Miles see that affidavit. It wasn't part of the plan. Please, honey, we love you. Don't do this to us." Then, 20 minutes later, my father, "Pick up the phone, Julia." 10 minutes later, "You think you're smart? You think you've won something? You've just painted a target on your back. You bring those papers back tonight, or I swear to God, you will have nothing left to come home to." Then, silence for an hour. Then, a different tone. Bargaining. "Jules, it's Dad. Look, I'm sorry I yelled. I'm just stressed. We're all stressed. Let's talk about this. We can fix this. Just don't give that paper to the lawyer yet. Let's meet for breakfast. Just you and me. Daddy-daughter time. Please." I didn't answer. I sat on my floor, listening to the messages, transcribing them into a notebook. Time, 9:42 p.m. Threat level high. I wasn't crying anymore. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But it was being overtaken by curiosity. My father was terrified, not just of the law, but of something else, something specific. Grant Halverson. I typed the name into my laptop. Nothing obvious came up. A few people with that name in Minnesota and Texas. No one in Briar Glen. No one linked to Renfall Community Outreach. I tried variations. Halverson Holdings. Halverson Trust. I found a press release from 5 years ago. A small local paper in a neighboring county. Local philanthropist Grant Halverson pledges matching funds for historic preservation. There was no photo. Just a name and a vague description of a private investor. I printed the page. It wasn't much, but it was a start. At 7 the next morning, I was parked outside Alyssa Quill's office. I hadn't slept. I had the notarized packet in a plastic sleeve, protecting it like a religious artifact. When Alyssa let me in, she looked fresh, sharp, and ready for war. She made me coffee while I laid the documents out on her desk. She read the affidavit. She saw the notary stamp. She saw the clarifying note Renee had added in the margin about the safe. She looked up at me and smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "You got them," she said. "I got them." I said, But my father. He slipped. He mentioned a name, Grant Halverson, and he mentioned a donor list. Alyssa's smile faded. She pulled a notepad closer. Tell me exactly what he said. He said the affidavit would expose them. He said Grant Halverson would be angry, and he tried to stop me from taking the originals. Alyssa tapped her pen on the desk. Grant Halverson, she murmured. I know that name. He's not in the criminal databases. He's adjacent, real estate, private lending, the kind of guy who owns the building that the courthouse is in, but never steps inside a courtroom. She looked at the affidavit again. This is valuable, Julia, but not in the way you think. It doesn't prove you are innocent of the fraud. Technically, you just admitted to signing the confession. I felt my heart drop. So I messed up? No, she said. You created leverage. If we show this to the prosecutor, we are not asking for mercy. We are handing them a map. We are saying, look, the parents admitted control. The parents admitted the money went to the house, and the parents are terrified of a third party named Halverson. She leaned in. Prosecutors are lazy. Julia, they want the low-hanging fruit, right now. That is you. But if we can show them that you are just the door to a much bigger room, a room full of other people's money, they might decide you are more useful as a witness than a defendant. She picked up the phone. I am going to file a motion to suppress the confession based on duress, using the affidavit as proof of the coercive environment, and then I am going to subpoena the financial records of Renfall Community Outreach, not just the account with your name, all of them. She looked at me. We are going to kick the anthill, she said, and we are going to see what comes running out. We spent the next 3 days building the paper trail. Alyssa was right. The affidavit was a crowbar. It allowed us to pry open doors that had been shut. We requested the tax filings for Renfall Community Outreach. As a nonprofit, their Form 990Hs were public record. We pulled the last 3 years. I sat in Alyssa's conference room, surrounded by boxes of paper. I was in my element. I wasn't a victim here. I was an auditor. I traced the numbers. Renfall was supposed to be a community outreach program. They claimed to provide financial literacy grants to low-income families. I looked at the grant disbursements. Grant recipient, Henderson Ledger Solutions. Amount, $75,000. Grant recipient, Marrow Pike Renovations. Amount, $120,000. Grant recipient, Briar Glen Consulting Group. Amount, $50,000. I looked at the addresses. Marrow Pike Renovations was listed at an address that, according to Google Maps, was a self-storage facility. Briar Glen Consulting Group shared an address with a local car wash. And Henderson Ledger Solutions, my company, was the vacant storefront. These weren't grants. They were kickbacks. Renfall was taking in donations, tax-deductible donations, and funneling them out to shell companies. And then I saw it. On the Schedule B form, the list of contributors. It was supposed to be redacted for the public copy, but someone had been sloppy. The redaction marker was translucent on the scan. I held the page up to the light. Major contributor, Halverson Capital Management. Amount, $500,000. My blood ran cold. My parents weren't just stealing from a charity. They were laundering money for Grant Halverson. They took the money from him as a donation to the nonprofit. Then they paid it out to shell companies like mine. Then, presumably, the cash found its way back to Halverson, or paid for things he didn't want his name on. And my father had used my name to build one of the washing machines. I stared at the paper. I thought about my father's face when he tried to grab the affidavit. Grant Halverson is going to want to see this resolved. He wasn't protecting the family home. He was protecting himself from a loan shark in a suit. He had borrowed money from Halverson, or lost it, and this was how he was paying it back. By running money through his daughter's identity, I felt a sudden, sharp clarity. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just about money, it was about survival. My parents were caught in something much bigger than a mortgage payment, and they had decided that throwing me to the wolves was the only way to keep the pack from the door. I picked up the file and walked into Alyssa's office. I found the link. I said. She looked up. I put the tax return on her desk. Renfall is awash. I said, it's a laundromat. And Halverson is the one supplying the dirty laundry. Alyssa looked at the document. She let out a low whistle. Okay, she said. This changes things. How? I asked. She looked at me, her eyes serious. It means we aren't just fighting a theft charge anymore, she said. We are fighting a racketeering case, and people like Halverson don't like it when their accountants start talking. She opened her drawer and pulled out a burner phone. You need to get a new number, she said, and you need to stay out of Briar Glen. Sleep at a hotel tonight. Why? I asked. Because, she said, your father knows you have the affidavit, and now he's going to tell Halverson that you are a problem. And problems in this town have a way of disappearing. I took the phone. I thought about my apartment, my quiet life, my beige existence. It was gone. I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and my parents were the ones who had pushed me. But I had the parachute. I had the originals. I'm not disappearing. I said, I'm just getting started. The next 72 hours were a study in the archaeology of betrayal. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I lived in the conference room of Alyssa Quill's office, surrounded by stacks of paper that smelled of toner and old secrets. We were building a reconstruction of my life. Or rather, the version of my life my parents had manufactured. Forensic accounting is less about math and more about narrative. Numbers tell a story. If you look at a bank statement long enough, you can see the character of the person who owns it. You can see their impulses, their fears, their addictions. When I looked at the statements for Henderson Ledger Solutions, the shell company bearing my name, I saw a story of frantic, disciplined theft. We started with the bank records Alyssa had subpoenaed, using the notarized affidavit as probable cause for a coerced identity defense. The bank, terrified of liability, had sent over the PDFs in 24 hours. I projected the spreadsheet onto the wall. Here is the flow, I said, my laser pointer trembling slightly against the white plaster. Money comes in from Renfall Community Outreach. It is labeled as consulting fees or strategic planning. It hits the Henderson Ledger account on the 1st of the month. I trace the line to the next column. And here is where it goes out, I said. 48 hours later, almost like clockwork, checks written to Marrow and Pike Renovations. Alyssa looked up from her laptop. Who are Marrow and Pike? I don't know. I said, but I looked them up. They are a licensed contractor in the county. But look at the amounts. $12,000, $18,000, $25,000, all for property maintenance and structural repairs. I pulled up a separate window. These were the addresses listed on the invoices. I pointed to the first one, 4022 Oak Street. That is the vacant storefront where my shell company is registered. It is 800 square feet of empty linoleum. They billed $18,000 for roofing repairs on a unit that is the middle of a strip mall. I pointed to the second address. And this one. This is a residential address in Stonebridge. I drove by it last night. It is a burnt-out husk. It has been condemned since a fire 3 years ago. Marrow and Pike billed $12,000 for electrical upgrades on a house that doesn't have a meter. It is a kickback loop, Alyssa said, rubbing her temples. Renfall pays your LLC. Your LLC pays the contractor. The contractor probably keeps a cut, maybe 10%, and hands the rest back in cash to whoever is running the show, to Grant Halverson. I said, and your father, Alyssa added. I stared at the numbers. My father wasn't just a participant. He was the architect of the bridge. He had used my credit score as the foundation for a money laundering tunnel. But we needed more than just the flow of funds. We needed to prove I wasn't the one pushing the buttons. The prosecutor, a Serena Voss, would look at this and say, so what? Julia Henderson is an accountant. She knows how to set up a shell company. She knows how to fake invoices. She is just as likely to be the mastermind as her father. I needed to place the pen in their hands. I went back to the digital trail. The bank account for Henderson Ledger Solutions had been opened online. Most banks allow you to open business accounts remotely if you have the right personal data. Social security number, mother's maiden name, Previous addresses. My parents had all of that. They had given it to me. But digital actions leave footprints. I requested the metadata logs from the bank's security team. It was a long shot, but Alyssa phrased the request perfectly, citing identity theft verification when the logs came back. I scanned the IP addresses, the account opening ceremony. The moment my digital soul was sold happened on March 14th, 2 years ago. I cross-referenced the IP address logged by the bank's server. IP address 68.142.22.1.19. I ran a geolocation trace. It resolved to a residential ISP node in Briar Glen. Then I went deeper. I dug into my old emails from 2 years ago. I found a casual email I had sent to my mother with a photo of a recipe. I checked the header information on her reply. Sender IP 68.142.22.1.19. The match was perfect. The account had been opened from the internet connection at my parents' house. I felt a grim satisfaction, followed immediately by a wave of exhaustion. It was technical proof. It proved the computer that opened the account was in their living room. But then I found the nail in the coffin. The bank required a signature card. It had been uploaded via a document signing platform, DocuSign. I pulled the audit trail for that specific envelope ID. The audit trail records every time a document is viewed or signed. Viewed by Robert, hendersongmail.com at 8:14 p.m. Signed by Julia Henderson at 8:16 p.m. IP address 68.142.22.1.19. My father had logged into the document platform using his own email address, force of habit, probably, viewed the document, and then applied my electronic signature 2 minutes later from the same device. He had signed my name while logged in as himself. I printed the page. It was a single sheet of paper, but it weighed 1,000 pounds. It was the smoking gun. I needed to look my mother in the eye. I couldn't just hand this to the lawyer and wait. I needed to understand. I needed to know if she was a hostage or a partner. The affidavit suggested she was involved, but the affidavit was a legal trap. I needed the human truth. I called her. I told her I wanted to talk, alone. I told her I was thinking about signing the plea deal, but I needed to ask her one question first. We met at a coffee shop in a town halfway between Briar Glen and Stonebridge. It was neutral ground. When she walked in, she looked small. She was wearing a trench coat that was too big for her, and she kept looking over her shoulder as if she expected the police to jump out from behind the espresso machine. We sat in a booth in the back. I didn't order anything. I put the audit trail on the table. I didn't explain it. I just let it sit there. "Mom," I said gently, "I know Dad opened the account. I have the proof. I have the digital logs." She looked at the paper, but she didn't read it. She just stared at her hands. "Julia, please," she whispered. "You have to stop digging. You don't know what you are unraveling." "I think I do." I said, "You are laundering money for Grant Halverson. You are using a fake construction company to pull cash out of a nonprofit, and you used my name to do it." She flinched. Tears started to well up in her eyes, spilling over her cheeks in silent, practiced tracks. "We didn't have a choice," she said. "There is always a choice. Mom, you could have sold the house. You could have filed for bankruptcy. You didn't have to make me a felon. You don't understand," she hissed, her voice rising. "It wasn't about money. It was about safety." "Safety?" I asked. "Who is threatening you?" She looked around the shop, checking the other tables. Then she leaned in, her voice trembling. "Your father? He got involved in something. 3 years ago. He joined this club, a private investment group. He wanted to feel important. Julia, you know how he is. He felt like he was aging out of his career, and he wanted to be a player." I nodded. I knew my father's vanity. It was a bottomless pit. "Grant Halverson runs the group," she said. "They target people like your father. People with equity but no liquidity. They promise huge returns on real estate flipping. Dad borrowed money from Halverson to buy in. $50,000. "And he lost it?" I asked. "He didn't just lose it," she said. "The investment was a sham, but the debt was real. And the contract." "Julia, The contract wasn't a normal loan. It had clauses, penalty clauses, confessions of judgment. Halverson owns the deed to the house. He owns Dad's life insurance policy. He owns everything. She wiped her nose with a paper napkin. When Dad couldn't pay, Halverson gave him a choice. He said Dad could work it off. He needed someone to handle the administration for his charitable endeavors. He needed a bookkeeper who wouldn't ask questions. And you offered me, I said. My voice was ice. No, she cried. We tried to do it ourselves, but we needed a clean name. Dad's credit was ruined by the debt. We needed an identity that could pass a background check, Halverson suggested. He suggested we use a family member. He said it would keep it in the circle. So you sacrificed me to save the house. I said, we were protecting the family, she insisted, slamming her hand on the table. The other patrons looked over. She lowered her voice. If Dad didn't pay, Halverson was going to take the house. He was going to sue us into the street. He has lawyers. Julia, he destroys people. We thought if we just did it for a year, we could pay off the debt. We never thought you would get caught. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had taught me to pray, who had told me that honesty was the only thing that mattered. You weren't protecting the family. Mom, I said, you were protecting your lifestyle. You were protecting Dad's ego. I am the family, and you fed me to a shark. She reached for my hand. I pulled it away. 2 years in prison won't kill you, she whispered, repeating the mantra. If you take the plea, Halverson is happy. The investigation stops. We can sell the house quietly and move away. We will give you money when you get out. We will make it right. I stood up. I felt sick. It's too late to make it right. I said, and tell Dad something for me. Tell him I found the IP address. Tell him I know he signed my name. Julia. Don't, she begged. If you expose Halverson, he will come for us. He is already coming for you. Mom, I said, you just don't realize it yet. The meeting with ADA Serena Voss was in a small, windowless conference room at the county courthouse. The air conditioning was set to Arctic. Voss was a woman who looked like she was carved out of granite. Sharp features, a tight bun, and eyes that had seen every lie a human being could tell. Alyssa sat next to me. We had the evidence packet, the affidavit, the bank logs, the DocuSign audit trail. We laid it all out. Alyssa walked her through it, step by step, the coercion, the identity theft, the money laundering ring involving Marrow and Pike, the link to Halverson. Voss listened. She took notes. She didn't interrupt. When Alyssa finished, there was a long silence. Voss tapped her pen on the table. It is a compelling narrative, Ms. Quill, Voss said. Her voice was dry. And I don't doubt that Mr. and Mrs. Henderson are involved up to their necks. So you will drop the charges against Julia? Alyssa asked. Voss sighed. She closed the folder. No. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? Ms. Henderson, Voss said, turning to me. You are a CPA. You are 33 years old. You are intelligent. You claim your parents coerced you. You claim they stole your identity. But the fact remains that for 2 years, accounts in your name laundered nearly $200,000. But I didn't know. I protested. Ignorance is not a defense when you have a professional duty of care. Voss said, and frankly, a jury might not believe you. You expect 12 people to believe that an accountant didn't know her own name was on a business for 2 years? That she never saw a piece of mail? Never checked her credit report? I was protecting myself from my ex. I said, I froze everything. It looks like willful blindness. Voss said, and here's the reality. I have a case against you. It is neat. It is tidy. The documents have your name. If I go after your parents, or God forbid, Grant Halverson, I am looking at a 5-year investigation. I am looking at forensic audits, grand juries, and high-priced defense teams. Halverson has resources. You do not? She leaned forward. I am offering you the standard deal. Plead to 1 count of falsifying business records. 18 months. Suspended sentence after 12 if you behave. Restitution is waived if you assist in the case against Marrow and Pike. You want me to plead guilty to something I didn't do so you can have an easy win? I asked. My voice was shaking with rage. I want justice, Voss said, and in my experience, justice is usually a compromise. Take the deal. Miss Henderson, if you go to trial, and you lose, I will ask for the maximum, 5 years. I looked at Alyssa. Her jaw was tight. She knew Voss was bluffing, but she also knew the risk. Juries were unpredictable. And Voss was right about one thing. The optics were bad. We are done here, Alyssa said. We will see you in court. We walked out. I felt like I was walking through water. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. It was a machine that ate people to produce statistics, and I was the meal of the day. The call from work came 2 hours later. I was sitting in my car, eating a stale granola bar, when my phone rang. It was the HR director at the firm. Julia, she said. Her voice was pained. We received a notification from the state licensing board regarding a pending felony charge. I closed my eyes. They moved fast. Voss must have filed the formal indictment the moment we walked out of the room. I can explain. I said, it is a case of identity theft. My lawyer is handling it. I am sure, she said, but per company policy, we cannot have anyone with a pending financial crime charge handling client assets. We have to place you on administrative leave. Effective immediately. Unpaid? I asked. Knowing the answer, I am afraid so. We will need you to return your laptop and badge by the end of the day. Security will meet you in the lobby. Security. I had worked there for 5 years. I had organized the office charity drive. I had stayed late to help the interns. And now I was going to be met by a guard like a thief. I drove to the office. I didn't go up. I left my laptop and badge at the front desk in a bag. I didn't want to see the looks. I didn't want to see the pity in the receptionist's eyes. Or worse, the suspicion. When I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with texts. Hey, is everything okay? I heard a weird rumor. Sarah, my work friend, Julia, call me. My ex-boyfriend, who hadn't called in a year. The news was spreading. In a town like ours, a felony charge was blood in the water. My reputation, the one thing I had guarded so fiercely, was evaporating. I was no longer Julia the accountant. I was Julia the embezzler. I deleted the texts. I blocked the numbers. I was alone. I went back to the hotel where I was staying. It was a cheap place on the highway, the kind with neon signs that buzzed all night. I couldn't go home. I felt like my apartment was watched. I opened my laptop and connected to the hotel Wi-Fi. I needed to see what my parents were doing. If Voss was moving forward, my parents might think they were in the clear, or they might be panicking. I logged into Zillow. I set a filter for Briar Glen. There it was. New listing. 404 Maple Drive. $550,000. My parents' house. It had been listed 3 hours ago. The description was frantic. Price to sell. Cash offers preferred. Quick closing available. They were liquidating. I checked the bank accounts I still had access to. The joint account I had shared with my mother when I was in college. The one she swore she never used. Withdrawal. $9,000. Cash. Withdrawal. $4,500. Cash. They were draining the liquidity. They were getting ready to run. They weren't going to stick around and support me through prison. They were going to sell the house, take the cash, and disappear to Florida or Arizona, leaving me to rot in a cell while they lived off the proceeds of the crime I was taking the fall for. The rage that had been simmering in my gut finally boiled over. It wasn't the hot, screaming rage of a tantrum. It was the cold, white-hot clarity of a sniper. I wasn't going to let them leave. I drove to Briar Glen. It was dark. The streets were quiet. I parked 2 blocks away from the house and walked through the neighbor's yard, keeping to the shadows. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. I could see movement inside. Boxes. They were packing. I crept up to the side of the house. Near the den window, it was cracked open slightly to let in the cool air. I could hear voices. My father was on the phone. His voice was loud. projected for an audience I couldn't see. No. Grant, listen, he was saying. The girl is unstable. You know that. She has had mental health issues since the breakup. She is making things up. I froze. I pressed myself against the siding. Yes. She forged the papers. He continued. We tried to cover for her. We tried to help her, but she is off the rails. She is fabricating this whole conspiracy to blame us. She threatened her mother today. He was selling me out. He wasn't just letting me take the blame. He was actively destroying my credibility to save his own skin with Halverson. He was painting me as crazy, as dangerous. I listened as he laughed. A nervous, sycophantic sound. Don't worry about the affidavit. He said, it's inadmissible. She coerced us into signing it. We'll testify that she threatened suicide if we didn't sign. It won't hold up. We are selling the house to pay you the balance. We'll be out of here by the end of the month. The girl will be in custody by then. The girl, not his daughter. The girl. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it was the last one. I wiped it away with a dirty hand. He thought I was unstable? He thought I was dangerous? I stepped back from the window. I looked at the house, at the life they were packing into boxes. He was right about one thing. I was dangerous. But not because I was crazy. I was dangerous because I had nothing left to lose. And I had the one thing they had forgotten about. I had the storage unit key. When I had raided the files in the beginning, I had found a key on a ring labeled spare. I hadn't known what it was for. But in the bank statements, I had seen a recurring payment to U-Store at Stonebridge. I had thought it was just household junk. But now, hearing my father promise Halverson that everything was contained, I knew better. They were packing the house, but they wouldn't keep the dirty laundry in the house. They would keep it somewhere safe, somewhere separate. I walked back to my car. I didn't confront them. I didn't scream. I started the engine and drove toward Stonebridge. I wasn't going to stop the sale of the house. I was going to burn the whole deal down. 2 weeks before the hearing that would determine whether I spent my mid-30s in a cell or a corner office. My phone lit up with a text from my mother. Please meet us. The diner on 4th. We want to make peace. No lawyers. Just family. My thumb hovered over the delete button. After hearing my father describe me as unstable to Grant Halverson, after finding the digital logs of his betrayal. The idea of breaking bread with them made my stomach turn, but I needed to know their endgame. They were selling the house. They were liquidating. If they were planning to flee, I needed to see the whites of their eyes. I arrived at the diner 10 minutes early. I chose a booth in the corner. Facing the door, I ordered a black coffee. I reached into my purse and switched on the voice recorder app on my phone, placing it screen down on the table, covered by a napkin. New York was a one-party consent state. I didn't need their permission to record a conversation I was a part of. I just needed them to talk. They walked in together, holding hands. It was a performance. They looked tired, aged by the stress of their own machinations, but they wore expressions of practiced benevolence. My father had shaved his beard, revealing a jawline that had gone soft. My mother was wearing a cardigan I had bought her for her birthday 3 years ago. They slid into the booth opposite me. The waitress poured them coffee. "We are so glad you came," my mother said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it back to wrap around my mug. "Let's skip the warmth," I said. "You are selling the house. I saw the listing." My father sighed. He put sugar in his coffee, stirring it with a slow, deliberate clinking sound. "We are downsizing," he said. "We have to. The legal bills, the stress. We can't keep up with the maintenance. We are thinking of moving to Florida, near your Aunt Linda." "And what about me?" I asked. "When you move to Florida, where will I be?" "That is what we wanted to talk about," he said. He leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "We know we have asked a lot of you, Julia. We know this situation is less than ideal, but we have a plan to make it right." I waited. "We are going to have some equity from the sale," he said. "Not a fortune, but enough. We want to set aside a portion for you, $50,000. We will put it in a trust. It will be there for you when you come home, when I come home from prison." I clarified. My mother flinched at the word. From the facility, she corrected gently. It's not prison. Honey, it's a camp, and with the deal Miles has set up, you could be out in 12 months. You could use the money for a down payment on a condo. You could start fresh. I looked at them. They were offering me $50,000 to sell my life. They were offering me a fraction of the money they had stolen in my name to buy my silence, and all I have to do is plead guilty. I said. My father nodded. Just take the plea. End the investigation. Stop the digging. If you keep fighting. Julia, you are going to uncover things that will hurt a lot of people, not just us. Dangerous people. Is that a threat? I asked. It is reality. He said, Grant Halverson is not a man who tolerates exposure. If you plead out, the case closes. The prosecutor moves on. Halverson gets his privacy. We pay off the debt with the house sale. Everyone survives. He looked at me with pleading eyes. 2 years is a blip. Julia, you are young. You can rebuild. But if you drag this out, if you bring Halverson into it, there is no coming back from that. I looked at the napkin covering my phone. I had it. I had him admitting there was a debt. I had him admitting Halverson was the pressure point. I stood up. I didn't drink my coffee. I will think about it. I lied. I walked out of the diner, my heart hammering against my ribs. I got into my car and drove. Not to my hotel, but north, towards Stonebridge. My father had mentioned dangerous people. He had mentioned Halverson, but he had also mentioned that he wanted to stop the digging. I was done digging with a spoon. I was ready to use a shovel. The key I had found in the file cabinet, the one labeled spare, felt heavy in my pocket. I had traced the recurring payments from the bank statements to a facility called You Store It on the outskirts of Stonebridge. It was a bleak row of corrugated metal units surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. I went to the main office. I didn't have the gate code, but I had a driver's license that matched the name on the account. Because of course the unit was in my name, I told the attendant I had lost my code. He looked at my ID, grunted, and wrote a 6-digit number on a sticky note. Unit 402, he said. I drove to the back of the lot. Unit 402 was halfway down a long, shadowed aisle. I parked and got out. The wind was whipping dead leaves against the metal doors. It sounded like whispering. I tried the key. It slid into the padlock with a smooth, oily click. I rolled the door up. It rumbled like thunder. The unit was small, 5 feet by 10. But it was packed. It wasn't filled with old furniture or holiday decorations. It was filled with banker's boxes, dozens of them, stacked floor to ceiling. I pulled the first box down. It was labeled Wren, Receipts, 2023. I opened it. Inside were hundreds of receipts for consulting services, community outreach materials, and office supplies. I picked up a receipt for $3,000 for laptops. It was from a store that didn't exist. The address on the receipt was a vacant lot I recognized from my research. I opened another box, prepaid. It was full of burner phones, plastic clamshell packaging. Opened, the phones were gone, but the activation cards were there. I checked the dates. They matched the timeline of the bank transfers. These were the phones my father used to verify the transactions, to confirm the identity he had stolen. And then, in the back corner, on a metal shelf, I found the binder. It was a thick black 3-ring binder. The spine label was handwritten in thick marker. Wren, Q4, intake/output. I opened it. It was a manual. It was a step-by-step guide on how to launder money. There were flowcharts. There were lists of shell companies. And there were handwritten notes in the margins. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was the same jagged, impatient scrawl that had signed my report cards, that had written checks for my tuition, my father's handwriting. I turned to a page titled November Distribution. There was a note circled in red ink. Use Julia LLC for intake. Route to MP within 48 hours. Keep balance below 10,000 to avoid automatic flag. I felt the air leave my lungs. Use Julia LLC. He hadn't just used my name. He had written it down as a directive. He had operationalized his daughter. I turned the page. There was another note, this one even more damning. Halverson payment due 15th. If cash flow short, increase invoice to Renfall. Grant authorized overage. This was it. This was the link. It proved my father was taking orders from Halverson. It proved the grants were fabricated to cover the debt payments. And it proved that I was nothing more than a mechanism, a valve they turned to keep the money flowing. I took the binder. I took the box of phone cards. I took photos of everything else. I rolled the door down and locked it. As I walked back to my car, I felt a strange sense of calm. The ambiguity was gone. The question of, did they really mean to hurt me, was answered. Yes, they did. Alyssa Quill looked at the binder as if it were a holy relic. We were back in her office, the blinds drawn. This is the Holy Grail, she said softly. She ran her finger over the note that said, Use Julia LLC. This connects the intent to the action, she said. It proves premeditation, and it proves you were a tool, not a partner. We need to get this to Voss. I said. Alyssa nodded. We do. But we need to frame it carefully. Voss is stubborn. She has invested time in the theory that you are the mastermind. We have to give her a way to change her mind without looking stupid. She drafted a cover letter. She didn't call it a defense. She called it a proffer of evidence regarding third-party control. We submitted the packet the next morning. It included the binder pages, the photo of the burner phone box, the lease agreement for the storage unit, signed with a forgery so bad it was laughable, and the audio recording of the peace talk at the diner. Voss agreed to meet us 48 hours later. This time, the atmosphere in the conference room was different. Voss wasn't looking at her watch. She was looking at the binder, which sat in the center of the table. She listened to the recording. My father's voice filled the room, tinny and desperate. Grant Halverson is not a man who tolerates exposure. Voss turned off the recorder. She looked at me. This is disturbing, she admitted. But? I asked. I heard the but in her voice. But it is not exculpatory, she said. I stared at her. How is it not? He admits he is paying Halverson. He admits he wants me to take the fall to protect them from Halverson. Or, Voss said, playing with her pen, he is a father trying to get his daughter to take a plea deal because he knows the evidence against her is overwhelming. And he is making up a story about a scary loan shark to scare her into compliance. You can't be serious, Alyssa said. I have to look at this from a jury's perspective. Voss said calmly, a jury sees a young woman with financial troubles. They see a parent's house being sold. They might see this recording as two parents who are terrified their daughter is going to drag them down with her. So they are offering her money to end it. They might see the binder as something you and your father created together. She tapped the page with the handwriting. Yes, it is his handwriting. But you are an accountant. Maybe he was taking notes on your instructions. I felt a scream building in my throat. The logic was twisted, circular. No matter what evidence I brought, the system warped it to fit the shape of my guilt. So what do I have to do? I asked. What do I have to do to prove I didn't do this? You have to prove lack of knowledge, Voss said. And right now, you have a storage unit in your name full of evidence. You have a shell company in your name. You have a bank account in your name. You are the common denominator. Ms. Henderson. She stood up. The offer stands. 18 months. But I'm taking it off the table on Friday at 5 o'clock. After that, we go to trial. And if we go to trial, I am adding a money laundering charge for every check in that binder. I went back to the hotel. I felt defeated. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Voss's words. You are the common denominator. At 9 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. I froze. No one knew I was here except Alyssa. I walked to the peephole. It was my father. He looked unraveled. His hair was messy, his eyes wild. He was wearing a tracksuit, something I had never seen him wear outside the house. I didn't open the door. Go away, I said through the wood. Julia, please, he said. His voice was muffled, desperate. I know you're in there. I saw your car. We need to talk. Just for a minute. I have something for you. I hesitated. I had the chain on. I cracked the door 2 inches. "What do you want?" I asked. He pushed a document through the crack. It was crumpled. "Sign this," he said. I took it. I unfolded it. It was a handwritten confession. Julia Henderson, acting alone, utilized family connections to defraud. It was tailored perfectly to Voss's theory. It exonerated them completely. "Why would I sign this?" I asked. "Because Mom is in the hospital," he said. My heart stopped. "What?" She collapsed. He said, "Chest pains, stress. The doctors say it's her heart. She can't take this. Julia, the investigation, the threat of Halverson. She is dying." He pressed his face to the crack in the door. "If you sign this, I can show it to Halverson. I can show him it's over. He will back off, and I can show it to the prosecutor. Mom will be safe." I looked at his eyes. They were wet, red-rimmed. But there was something else there. A frantic calculation. "Which hospital?" I asked. "What? Which hospital is she in?" I asked again. "St. Jude's," he said. "In Stonebridge." I pulled my phone out. I dialed St. Jude's information desk. I put it on speaker. "Yes, I am looking for a patient. Eleanor Henderson." The operator paused. "One moment." My father watched me. His breathing shallow. "I am sorry." The operator said, "We have no one by that name admitted." I hung up. I looked at my father. "She isn't in the hospital." I said, "You are lying." Again. He slammed his hand against the door. The chain rattled. "Just sign the damn paper," he screamed. "You selfish bitch! You are going to ruin everything." He wasn't a father anymore. He was a man drowning, trying to climb on top of me to breathe. "2 years won't kill you," he yelled. He said it again, the mantra of my destruction. But this time, it wasn't advice. It was a promise. "If you don't do this," he hissed, lowering his voice to a terrifying calm, "Halverson is going to handle it his way, and 2 years in prison will look like a vacation compared to what he does." I stepped back. I held the crumpled confession in my hand. I kept the originals. "Dad," I said. He froze. "What?" "The affidavit." I said, "The one Renee notarized. I didn't give you the originals. I have them, and I have the binder from the storage unit, and I have the recording from the diner." His face went pale. All the color drained out of him, leaving him looking like gray putty. You have the binder?" "Yes," I said, "and Voss has a copy." He looked at me with pure horror. He wasn't looking at his daughter. He was looking at his executioner. He backed away from the door. He didn't say another word. He turned and ran down the hallway. I heard the stairwell door slam. I shut the door and locked it. I engaged the deadbolt. I dragged the dresser in front of the door. I sat on the bed, shaking. I knew I had just pulled the pin on the grenade. He was going to tell Halverson. He had no choice. He was cornered. The next morning, the grenade exploded. I was packing my bag, getting ready to leave the hotel. I didn't feel safe there anymore. I was going to go to Alyssa's house. She had a guest room, and she had a security system. There was a pounding on the door. Not a knock. A pounding. "Police! Open up!" I dropped my bag. I walked to the door. I didn't open it. "I have a lawyer." I shouted, "Open the door. Ms. Henderson, or we will breach it. We have a warrant." I moved the dresser. My hands were numb. I opened the door. 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a cheap suit pushed past me. They didn't ask if I was okay. They started tearing the room apart. "What is going on?" I asked. "Detective Miller," the man in the suit said. He flashed a badge. "We received a credible tip that you are in possession of stolen documents related to the Renfall investigation and that you are actively destroying evidence." "A tip?" I asked. "From who?" "I think you know," he said. He picked up my laptop. He picked up the box of files I had brought from Alyssa's office. "I am not destroying evidence," I said. "I am preserving it." "That's for the court to decide," he said. He handcuffed me. I felt the cold steel on my wrists. It was happening. The nightmare was becoming real. "You can't do this," I said. "Call Alyssa Quill. We'll call her from the station," he said. They marched me out of the hotel. People were watching from their doorways. I saw the flashing lights of the cruiser reflecting in the windows. I sat in the back of the police car. It smelled of stale sweat and disinfectant. I realized what had happened. My father had called Halverson. Halverson had called a favor. They weren't trying to arrest me for the fraud. Not yet. They were trying to get the binder back. They were using the police as their personal retrieval service. The tip was a lie. The warrant was a weapon. I closed my eyes. I was going to jail. Not in 2 weeks. Now. And the hearing, the critical hearing where I was supposed to present my defense, was in 3 days. I had the truth on my side. But they had the power. And as the car pulled away, taking me toward the precinct where my parents had probably already given their statements, I realized that the truth is a very quiet thing when you are locked in a cage. The 72 hours between my arrest and the hearing were not measured in time. But in the degradation of my body, I was released from the precinct 6 hours after the raid, thanks to Alyssa Quill, who stormed into the station with a writ of habeas corpus and a fury that terrified the desk sergeant. The police had confiscated the binder and the box of burner phones, tagging them as evidence in a theft investigation against me. It was the ultimate irony. My father had called the police to accuse me of stealing the evidence of his crimes. By doing so, he had placed the smoking gun directly into the hands of the state. He thought he was disarming me. In reality, he had forced the prosecutor to look at the weapon, but I did not feel triumphant. I felt hunted. I went back to Alyssa's house. I did not sleep. When I closed my eyes, I saw the flashing lights reflecting in the hotel window. I saw my father's face through the crack in the door, twisted with a malice that I still could not reconcile with the man who taught me to ride a bicycle. My anxiety became a physical entity. It lived in my throat, a hard lump that made swallowing difficult. I lost my appetite completely. The smell of food made me nauseous. I survived on black coffee and adrenaline. My hands shook so badly I could not hold a pen. So I typed everything. I reconstructed the timelines again. I annotated the digital copies of the binder logs we had scanned before the raid. I prepared scripts for questions I might be asked. I refused to cry. Crying was a luxury for people who were safe. I was not safe. I was a soldier in a trench, and if I stopped cleaning my rifle, I would die. Melodrama was the enemy. Facts were the only friends I had left. Alyssa was fighting a war on 2 fronts. She was negotiating with ADA Serena Voss, trying to get the charges dropped, and she was fighting the destruction of evidence allegation from the raid. I sat in her kitchen, watching her pace while she was on the phone with Voss. "Serena, look at the chain of custody," Alyssa argued, her voice tight. "The documents were in a storage unit leased in my client's name. Yes, but look at the signature on the lease. It is a forgery. And look at the contents. My client didn't steal them from Renfall. She recovered them. She was preserving evidence of a racketeering operation. If you charge her with theft for holding on to proof of her own innocence, you are going to look very foolish when the federal investigators get involved." She paused, listening, because, "Serena, if you don't look at the binder the police seized, I will go to the press. I will tell them the district attorney's office is acting as a repo man for a money laundering ring." Alyssa hung up. She looked at me. "Voss is wavering." She said, "She has the binder. Her investigators are going through it. The handwritten notes from your father. They are hard to ignore, but the institution is slow. Julia, they have spent 2 months building a case against you. Turning that ship around takes time. And we have a hearing in 48 hours. What happens at the hearing?" I asked. My voice was raspy. "We go in," Alyssa said. "We enter a plea of not guilty. And we put the notarized affidavit on the record. We make it public. The day before the hearing, a new variable entered the equation. Alyssa received a call from a woman named Tessa Marlowe. I knew the name. She was listed on the Renfall website as a board member, a community liaison. Tessa agreed to meet us at a park bench near the river, far away from Briar Glen. She was a woman in her 60s, wearing a wool coat and clutching a handbag as if it contained the nuclear codes. She looked terrified. "I am not going to jail," was the first thing she said when we sat down. "We don't want you to go to jail, Tessa," Alyssa said gently. "We just want the truth." Tessa looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Your father," she said, shaking her head. "He was so charming at first. He told us he was fixing the books. He told us Grant Halverson was a benevolent donor who just wanted to help the community. And then?" I asked. "And then the invoices started," she said, "for the construction work. I asked to see the permits. Your father told me to mind my own business. He said Halverson doesn't like nosy people. He said accidents happen to people who ask too many questions." She shivered, pulling her coat tighter. "I resigned from the board 6 months ago." She said, "But I signed the checks. Julia, I signed them because he told me to." "Did you ever see me?" I asked. "Did I ever come to a meeting? Did I ever give an instruction?" "Never," Tessa said. "It was always Robert. He would say, 'My daughter is handling the back end,' or 'Julia needs these signed.' But I never saw you. Not once. Will you testify to that?" Alyssa asked. Tessa hesitated. She looked at the river, watching the gray water churn. "If I testify, Halverson will know," she whispered. "If you don't testify," Alyssa said, "and this investigation goes federal, you will be named as a co-conspirator. You signed the checks. Tessa, the only way out is to be a witness." Tessa closed her eyes. She nodded, a single, sharp jerk of her head. "Okay," she said. "I'll say it, but I want protection." The morning of the hearing was gray and cold. A fine mist hung over the city, turning the world into a smudge of charcoal and slate. I dressed in my armor, a navy blue suit, a white blouse buttoned to the collar, and heels that clicked with authority on the marble floor of the courthouse. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I applied my makeup with surgical precision, hiding the dark circles, hiding the fear. I met Alyssa at the metal detectors. She looked fierce. She was carrying a leather briefcase that contained the original notarized packet, the Holy Grail. We walked toward courtroom 4B. The hallway was crowded with lawyers and defendants, a sea of misery and billable hours. And then I saw them. My parents were sitting on a bench near the courtroom doors. They had dressed the part perfectly. My father was wearing a charcoal suit that was slightly too big for him, making him look frail, diminished. My mother was wearing black, as if she were attending a funeral. She was clutching a tissue in her hand, dabbing at dry eyes. When they saw me, the performance began. My mother let out a small, choked sob. She reached out a hand toward me. "Julia," she whispered. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I looked through them as if they were made of glass. My father stood up. He blocked my path. "Jules, please," he said. His voice was low. "Urgent. It's not too late. Miles is inside. He can still talk to the prosecutor. We can end this right now. Just say the word." I stopped. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had signed my name to a shell company, who had sold me to a loan shark, who had sent the police to my hotel room. "The word is perjury, Dad," I said, "and I am done with it." I stepped around him. I felt his hand graze my arm, a phantom touch of ownership that made my skin crawl. I walked through the double doors and didn't look back. The courtroom was smelling of floor wax and old wood. I sat at the defense table next to Alyssa. My parents sat in the gallery behind me. I could feel their eyes on the back of my neck, burning like lasers. Miles Brandt, their lawyer, my fired lawyer, was sitting in the gallery too. He wasn't representing me anymore, but he was watching. He was the observer for the conspiracy. The bailiff called the case. State of New York versus Julia Henderson. I stood up. My legs felt like lead, but I locked my knees. Judge Malcolm Reed was a man with a face like a topographic map, full of lines and ridges. He looked tired. He looked at the file, then at me, then at the prosecutor. ADA. Serena Voss stood up. She looked different today. She wasn't looking at me with the predatory gaze of a prosecutor sensing a kill. She was looking at her notes, her brow furrowed. Ms. Voss, Judge Reed said, we are here for arraignment on the superseding indictment. How does the state wish to proceed? I held my breath. This was it. She was going to add the money laundering charges. She was going to bury me, Your Honor, Voss said, her voice clear. The state requests a continuance of 14 days. The room went silent. A continuance? Judge Reed frowned. On what grounds? This case has been on the docket for weeks. The defendant has a right to a speedy trial. New evidence has come to light. Your Honor, Voss said, specifically, documents seized pursuant to a warrant executed 48 hours ago, and a proffer of evidence submitted by the defense counsel. The state requires time to authenticate these documents and trace the financial spiderweb they reveal. My father shifted in his seat behind me. I heard the wood creak. Alyssa stood up. No objection to the continuance. Your Honor, she said. However, we would like to enter a specific piece of evidence into the record today, to preserve it against any further interference. Interference? Judge Reed asked. Ms. Henderson has been subject to harassment and intimidation, Alyssa said. Her residence was raided based on a false tip. We wish to file the affidavit of mutual knowledge and beneficiary status, notarized on January 20th. She walked to the bench and handed the original document to the clerk. My father gasped. It was audible. A sharp intake of breath that sounded like a tire puncturing. Judge Reed took the document. He put on his reading glasses. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the hum of the HVAC system. I could hear the pounding of my own heart. Reed read the first page, then the second. He flipped back to the notary block. He looked at the stamp. He looked at the signatures. He looked up at me. Ms. Henderson, he said. Yes, Your Honor. I said, did you sign this document? Yes, Your Honor. And did your parents, Robert and Eleanor Henderson, sign this document in your presence? Yes, Your Honor. Were they under duress? No, Your Honor. I said. My voice was steady, cold, precise. They signed it because I refused to sign a false confession they had prepared for me unless they acknowledged their role in the accounts. They signed it to facilitate what they believed would be a plea deal that would conceal their involvement. And you hired a mobile notary? Reed asked. Looking at the seal. Yes, Your Honor. Renee Park. She is prepared to testify to the authenticity of the signatures and the statements made during the signing. Specifically, the statement my father made regarding a donor list and a promise to a third party. Judge Reed lowered the paper. He looked over my head, into the gallery. He looked directly at my parents. I didn't turn around, but I felt the heat of his gaze. It was a spotlight. Ms. Voss, Judge Reed said, does the state have a copy of this? We do, Your Honor, Voss said. And in light of this document, and the binder recovered from the storage unit, which matches the handwriting on the affidavit, the state is opening a parallel investigation into the signatories of this affidavit. The heir left the room. Parallel investigation. It was legal speak for, we are coming for the parents. My mother started to cry. Real crying this time. High, panic-stricken whimpers. My father stood up. Your Honor, he shouted. The bailiff moved instantly, hand on his belt. Sit down. Sir, the bailiff ordered. My father ignored him. He stepped into the aisle. His face was a mask of terror and rage. Your Honor, please, he said, his voice trembling. My daughter, she is not well. She is under a lot of strain. She doesn't know what she is saying. This document, she tricked us. She told us it was just for the file. Mr. Henderson, Judge Reed boomed. His voice was like a gavel strike. She is being manipulated, my father cried, pointing a shaking finger at Alyssa. That lawyer is twisting everything. We were just trying to help her. 2 years won't kill her. We just wanted to save the house. The courtroom froze. He had said it. He had said the line. Judge Reed looked at him with an expression of utter disdain. 2 years won't kill her? Reed repeated. Is that your legal defense? Mr. Henderson? That your daughter is durable enough to serve your prison sentence? No, That's not what I meant, my father stammered. He looked around the room. He saw the faces of the strangers, the clerk, the stenographer, the other lawyers. They weren't looking at a grieving father. They were looking at a monster. He looked at me. I turned in my chair. I looked him full in the face. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at him with the blank, forensic detachment of an auditor looking at a bad ledger. "You are done, Dad," I mouthed. He saw it. He saw the realization hit him like a physical blow. The stage was gone. The script was burned. He wasn't the protagonist anymore. He was the defendant. The bailiff grabbed his arm. "Sit down, or I will remove you." My father collapsed onto the bench. He put his head in his hands. He looked small. He looked defeated. He looked afraid. Judge Reed turned back to the prosecutor. "Ms. Voss, the continuance is granted, but I expect a significant update on the status of this parallel investigation within the week, and I want a protective order issued for the defendant against her parents. Effective immediately. So moved," Voss said. "And Mr. Henderson," Reed added, staring at my father, "if you attempt to contact the defendant again, I will revoke your bail on the charges that I suspect are coming down the pipe very shortly. Do I make myself clear?" My father didn't answer. He just nodded into his hands. "Court is adjourned," Reed said. He banged the gavel. We walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was brighter now, or maybe my eyes had just adjusted to the light. My parents were still in the courtroom, huddled with Miles Brandt, who looked like he was trying to calculate how quickly he could distance himself from them. Alyssa walked beside me. She didn't hug me. She wasn't a hugger. She just handed me my briefcase. "You did good," she said. "Is it over?" I asked. "No," she said. "Now the real work starts. Voss is going to depose you. She is going to depose Tessa. The FBI will probably get involved because of the wire fraud. Your parents are going to be indicted. Halverson might even get pulled in. If the binder is as good as I think it is." She looked at me. "It's going to be messy. Julia, it's going to take a year, maybe 2. You will have to testify against them. You will have to put your own father in prison." I looked at the courtroom doors. I thought about the house on Maple Drive. I thought about the peace talk at the diner. I thought about the feeling of the pen in my hand when I signed the affidavit, the feeling of reclaiming my own name. "I know." I said. "Are you ready for that?" Alyssa asked. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. It tasted like truth. "I'm an accountant." "Alyssa," I said, "I like it when the numbers balance." I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the floor. I didn't know what I was going to do for a job. I didn't know where I was going to live. I had $50 in my wallet and a car that needed an oil change. But for the first time in 2 years, the name on my driver's license belonged to me. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped out into the rain. It was cold, and it was wet, and it felt absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for listening to 2 Years in Prison Won't Kai You. Parents forced me to take the blame. I called a mobile notary. I hope you enjoyed this story of betrayal, forensic accounting, and the ultimate payback. It was a journey to write Julia's transformation from a victim to a survivor who used the very tools of her trade to fight back. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment down below with your country or city. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. And please, share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Julia's shoes? Would you have signed the plea, or would you have fought back? Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next story.